Hey, how you doing there, Mr. O'Quinn here? Trying something a little bit different. Having trouble getting the stuff to upload. I'm gonna try to be quick here, as best I can, to cover the material. The assignment you're going to be working on is going to be called Before and After the Pendleton Act. Most of us have done that Pendleton Act assignment, and we know that it talks about the Civil Service Commission and that that people weren't just given jobs to because they supported a certain candidate, whatever, and they actually put in some laws that wouldn't allow that, civil service test and all that stuff. Okay, now before and after that. Okay, now here's the deal, the main idea of what we're doing here. Okay, from 1877 to 1896, the Republicans and the Democrats, they're very evenly matched. And when you have two evenly matched parties, stuff tends to not get done. So there's very few reforms that are made on the national level during this time. Some key things, terms, names that you just need to think about later on you may have to define are patronage, stalwarts, the Pendleton Act, which you already know about, rebate, and the Interstate Commerce Commission. Okay, now what we want to be able to do is kind of be able to explain why Republicans and Democrats were so evenly matched during this period from 1877 to 1896. And we all want to be able to kind of cite the economic problems of this period that we're talking about and the basic viewpoints of both political parties. Now, there's a whole theme here that runs through this little section, and it's called continuity and change. Those are kind of at odds with each other. Okay, I can remember back when I was young, you would get a cassette tape, and it would have like a little disclaimer thing on it that would say like, this side may run longer due to the continuity of the album or whatever. And what they were saying was continuity is something that they want to keep in order, and it keeps going the same. So it would basically, it would end up being maybe the same, like using the cassette reference, the same on the cassette that it was recorded onto the record. That continuity, meaning you're getting the truth all the way through, and everything's staying the same all the way through. And change, of course, is kind of the opposite of that. So basically what happens is political parties, they start to rely on support from these different groups in regions of the country. And you got to think of the times here, where, right at getting around 1900. So, I mean, we're talking about, telegraph communications. Certainly, telephone may be in there. I can't think of the top of my head. If so, very, very little. So you're looking at a lot of newspapers, pamphlets, stuff written, and word of mouth. That's why regions were so important. Okay, if I can be the big dog of this region, I can hold a lot of power because my region may hold a lot of votes. Okay. Kind of a little preview of what goes on. 1881. What happens in 1881? President Garfield gets assassinated. His vice president succeeds him, and Chester Arthur's now president. 1883, the Civil Service Act is adopted. 1887, Interstate Commerce Act adopted. In 1890, the Sherman Antitrust Act adopted. Kind of want to read you a little story here that kind of explains the mind frame of a lot of people during the time. Okay? After the election of President James A. Garfield in 1880, many of his supporters tried to claim the spoils of office. You should remember those from the Pendleton Act. The government jobs that follow an election victory. One of these job seekers was a guy named Charles Guiteau. That's Guiteau. And in the spring of 1881, this Guiteau guy, he was making daily trips to the White House, so he's going over to the State Department, and he kept going in there, I want a job, I want a job, I want a job, give me a job. You know, just give me a job, just like somebody, give me a job, give me a job, give me a job. Aggravating guy. So, finally, the night of May 18th, he kind of gets this little, I guess you could say inspiration, crazy inspiration. And he thinks, if the president is out of the way, everything might go a little bit better. Okay? So, totally unlike Garfield, Guiteau kind of thinks to himself, or reasons, that Vice President Chester Arthur was comfortable with that old spoil system. Okay? And there's a whole thing behind Arthur being there that we will get to later. So, what's Guiteau going to do? He's going to say, hey, I'm going to put Arthur where he needs to be, and Arthur's going to give me the position that I deserve. And on July 2nd, 1881, Guiteau kills President Garfield at a train station. It's near Capitol Hill. And he left a note behind. And this is what Guiteau said. And this should give you a really good, frame of mind of, this guy is crazy, but still, it's a reference of the frame of mind of a lot of people. For many, the assassination of President Garfield highlighted the need to work seriously on reforming. Oh, I'm sorry, read you the wrong thing, because we're talking about cleaning up politics there. Let me read you again this quote from Guiteau. The president's tragic death was sad, but a necessity. But it will unite the Republican Party and save the Republic. I had no ill will toward the president. His death was a political necessity. I am a lawyer, I am a theologian and politician, and I am a stalwart of the stalwarts. Okay, now that ultimately brings me to say, what's he talking about? Stalwarts. Well, first of all, I'm going to go ahead and tell you here. Okay. So, again, I told you, as I started to read down here, it said, after Garfield gets assassinated, this, really puts a spotlight on reforming politics, okay? Usually under the spoil system or patronage, government jobs went to people that supported the winning party, of course, in whatever election it may be. And a lot of Americans believe the spoil system prevented government from addressing the nation's issues, and it also corrupted people that work for the government in general. And by the time you get to around 1777, 78, 79, right at 1780, there's this movement to reform the civil service, and it starts to get this big support. So, in stalwarts and half-breeds, okay? Now, When Rutherford B. Hayes entered the White House in 1877, he attacked the practice of patronage by appointing reformers to his cabinet and replacing officials who owed their jobs to party bosses. Okay? His actions infuriated New York Senator Roscoe Conkling. Now, think about this, okay? Why would this do this? Because he's a boss, like those local bosses we talked about, of the Republican political machine that's rolling, and they called him a stalwart in the newspapers. The stalwarts are already kind of angry with Hayes because he abandoned Reconstruction, and we talked about that before, that that had to be one of the hardest things that any president ever had to do, was to decide when to end Reconstruction and say, okay, South, you're going to be part of us. We're not going to occupy you anymore. That had to be a tough decision. Okay, now, they're mad at him. Okay, so these stalwarts, they're angry. And what this abandonment allowed to do when they pulled out of the South, because you've heard the old term, old Southern Democrats. Well, when he pulled out of Reconstruction, this allowed Democrats to gain full control of the South. Like I said, it had to be a hard choice for a president to make. Conkling labeled the Republican reformers half-breeds. He accused them of backing reform simply to create openings for their own supporters. They are wolves in sheep's clothing. And, he was real kind of crazed about this. And he says their real object is office and plunder, meaning they're going to get in there and do what they want to do. So you got the presidential election of 18. It approached. Hayes had said, I'm not going to look at a second term, don't want it. So the Republicans nominated a mixed ticket, which was kind of smart. They had a half-breed, James Garfield, for president, and a stalwart, Chester A. Arthur, for vice president. Despite the party's feud, its ticket managed to win the election, and a few months passed into his presidency. But Garfield gets assassinated by Mr. Charles Guiteau that we talked about earlier. Okay, with that being said, that's where kind of the Pendleton Act was brought in that we talked about earlier. Now, we also talked about the two parties being neck and neck and not a whole lot being able to get done as far as reform, okay? And you got to remember, we're not far out of the Civil War here, guys. Not far out of the Civil War at all. Now, here's just something interesting that you need to know, okay? Both parties were well organized to turn out the vote in the elections, and narrow margins decided most presidential elections between 1876 and 1896. The elections of 1880 and 1888 came down to the swing states of New York, Ohio, and Pennsylvania with their big blocks of electoral votes. Sounds familiar? Twice during this period, in 1876 and 1888, a candidate lost the popular vote but won the election. This happened because even if the candidates win several states by slim popular vote margins, they still receive all the electoral votes in that state. And that's a whole other conversation. Now, Republicans won 4 out of the 6 presidential elections between 1876 and 1896. But now what happened was your president would have to contend with a House controlled by Democrats and the Senate dominated by Republicans, which usually means we get nothing done. They don't agree with him on many issues. Okay. Also, again, this era when local political bosses controlled the party. Basically, this equal division of power produced a basically political deadlock, even all the way up to the federal level by these bosses down at the regional level. And eventually the Democrats will reclaim the White House. Now, how does this happen? Well, I can see that I'm running well into 15 minutes. So, we'll get back to that later, but to go ahead and get ourselves where we need to be, I would like you to define patronage and rebate. I would like you to identify stalwart, half-breed, Interstate Commerce Commission. And that stalwart and half-breed, make sure it's in the, when you go and look it up, it's in the context of, late 1800s, daggone it, politics. Okay? I'm not going to do, we already done the Pendleton thing. Okay, I'll have that written down for you in the directions or instructions, whatever you want to call them, what I want you to do. But I just wanted to talk to you guys and make sure everybody's doing okay. If you need anything, let me know. Just contact me. Have happy holidays. Hope to see y'all soon.